I wanted to continue the discussion today about discerning God's will because I know this topic can be tricky, and that's why I broke it up. And here's what I'm learning. I don't know whether I have the right answers. I simply share what I learned from His Word and from my own journey. And God's will for you, in my opinion, is more about who you are becoming than what it is specifically you're trying to figure out. So He cares less about the actions you're taking. And I'm not talking about blatant sin. I'm just talking about day to day life. Am I in line with God's will? Am I in line with God's will? I think He cares less about that than who we are becoming, because He knows that we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have blunders and pitfalls and potholes and detours along the way. We're never going to get it completely right. But are we seeking His will? Is our intent to walk in obedience with Him? And in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 19, it reads, and this is in the New International Version, as water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. As the water reflects your face, so one's life reflects the heart. That's about who you are becoming. Is your life reflecting a life of intentional seeking out of God's will, intentional time spent with Him in prayer and in His Word? So, it's thinking about that internal landscape more than just the day-to-day circumstances. Who am I becoming in the process? I honestly believe that's what God cares about. And I've spoken before in I think 2 episodes back, where I spoke about Proverbs chapter 24, or sorry, chapter 4, verse 23, where it says, above all else, guard your heart. Again, it's keeping that spirit in alignment. And in Romans chapter 12, here's the other thing I'll say about it, is Romans chapter 12, verses 1 to 2. Paul says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. And here's the kicker: do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. So Paul is saying it there too. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, the renewing of your spirit, and the guarding of your heart. Care more about who you are becoming than just the day-to-day circumstances. And I would encourage you too to learn from the life of Joseph. I think I've mentioned this, that the last couple of months I've been studying the book of Genesis, and just incredible commentary by David Kuzik. And we learn a lot about life from Joseph, about the impact of living faithfully. I would encourage you to read Genesis chapters 37 through 50 when you can. Read Joseph's story, because the events of Joseph's life may not have been what he imagined. Trust me, he came from a messy family and he lived a very messy, tumultuous life. But he had one common thread: his faithful obedience to God, and always believing that God was with him, and that obedience resulted in God's blessing him and making him successful in all his endeavors. And sometimes we misquote or misunderstand what Paul says in Romans 8:28, when he says, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And as I read in David Kuzik's commentary, that Joseph's life was certainly not what he planned, but ultimately God's perfect will, God's perfect plan comes together because he uses all the pieces. God doesn't just choose one isolated incident and say, well, I'll work this to the good. He works in all things. So all those blunders, detours, distractions, mistakes, really dumb stuff that we do, God's going to bring it all together and he's going to weave it back into his perfect plan. So don't stress about whether you're in line with God's will. The way you know that you're in line with God's will is to spend time with him, and to the best of your ability, live a life that you believe is pleasing to him by guarding your heart and transforming your mind and stepping into the content of your character when it comes to your relationship with God. All the other details tend to fall into place because he will work all things to the good. So that's the last thing I'll say about God's will for a while. And until you see me again, may God richly bless you. Take care and bye for now.